Hello everybody! Welcome to another installment of Conversations in Wire with me, your host, James Browning. I'm a sales representative here at the Soft Flex Company. We are a jewelry wire manufacturer based out of sunny Sonoma, California. We do have a gallery that's open every Wednesday and Thursday. If you're in the area, we'd love to see you stop by. Today we are going to be working on a really cool technique. It's called Viking Knit. It's actually a really old process, but we have a new tool in-house called the Lazee Daizee, and so we are going to show how to use that, and I'm really excited about that because it is way less complicated than actually doing it the old-fashioned way. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm very excited about what we got going on. So this is the Lazee Daizee, and it is a tool specifically designed to do the Viking knit wire weave. The toolkit comes with some instructions, the actual Lazee Daizee, and a push pin. Now, don't lose that. That's actually really handy. So, Viking knit is a wire weaving technique that has been done for a very long time. Here's an example of a Viking knit weave. And then here is one that was done with 2 wires at the same time and drawn really thin, so it's actually got a very tight weave look to it. So before I found the Lazee Daizee, which we actually carry in our store, you can order online at www.softflex.com. This technique is usually done on a dowel or a pencil. I've seen it done on thick crochet needles or knitting needles, crochet hooks. Basically anything that's round. The thing is, when you're not using the Lazee Daizee, you have to set up this portion right here using like a different heavier gauge of wire that you'll be able to loop into. So this all-in-one thing makes everything really simple. The reason that they have a little tack or push pin is that there is times where you're going to get the knits off, or the hole is hard to get your wires through, so you can use your push pin to open up that, so it makes it easier, and I'll show you that because I'll definitely need that when I'm going. So the instructions that come with the Lazee Daizee have really easy to follow pictures and actual information, but because it is a little tricky until you get going, I'm going to show you how to start and how to finish. I'm not going to make a really big piece today because I don't want to have you sit here and you know, suffer through my 2-hour-long procedure. So, but I did want to point out on here, this Lazee Daizee is good for gauges 24 to 30, which means 24 is the thick end of the spectrum and 30 is the small end, the thin end. So you can use any wire between those ranges. And what they've done is they've given you a cute little chart here that says for 24, 26, and 28 gauge, if you make like 10 inches or 9 inches or 7 inches, 6 loops. So you can do different loops. I'm going to do 6 because it's the easiest, but you can definitely play around with your Lazee Daizee anytime you want to and try the different loops. It's just going to give you a more open weave that will change the look when you actually draw it through the draw plate. But anyway, this gauge says if you make this amount of raw, so that means just without drawing it through, if you draw it through a 1/4 inch hole, you're going to end up with 10 inches. So that's what the 24, and that's actually what we're going to use today. So the other things we're going to need for supplies is we're going to need 24 gauge craft wire. This is Soft Flex. It's copper core wire that's been plated, and it's also got an enamel coating on it so it doesn't tarnish. So it's really nice stuff. Dead soft, always good to start with. You're also going to need clippers or cutters, of course, our nylon jaw tools for straightening the wire. And then you'll probably want a pair of round nose to do some looping at the end, and then some regular pliers just to hold on to the wire when you're straightening it. You won't use those very often, but it's good to have. All right, so let's go ahead and start setting up here. Now, a couple of pro tips. The more wire that you pull out of your spool, the less you're going to have to change on the Lazee Daizee during your knit. However, this this weave is really kink kink attracting, there you go. You're going to kink your wires a lot if you have a lot of wire to work with. So honestly, you may have to add wire more often, but if you're just starting out with using wire or trying out the Viking knit technique, I would stick with no more than 24 inches. That's going to give you a lot to work with. It's going to last at least an inch or two. But it'll give you less chance of it to go kink on you. And the other thing is, the thinner the wire, the faster it kinks. And the thin wire, because you're using it so much, you're going to be straightening it so much with your fingers, that's going to work harden. My last project, I actually broke a couple of wires a couple of times. So this one that I was using, the 28 gauge wire, I was using 2 strands at once, and so when I was doing it, I was working it too much, and I got a kink in it, and I didn't pay attention to it, and it broke right off at the kink. So just be mindful of how much you're working your wire, as always. Alright, so especially with your heavier gauges like 24, we're going to straighten this out because it is pretty bumpy. And this project, this knit, really does show the different bumps and stuff, because you want your work to be as even and as uniform as you can, because when you draw it through the draw plate, you're going to see a difference. Some of the loops, let's see, the drawing really does help take out a lot of that, but if you're not careful with what you're doing, you can see different sizes of your loops when they all come together, and it doesn't look quite as attractive. I think you can actually see it more in this one that I did. Yeah. You know, it's just one of those techniques that you have to keep practicing on. So don't give up right away if it doesn't look right. It's just make another one. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, according to the instructions, is we're going to take our wire, and you see on the Lazee Daizee we've got 2 holes, well, 1 hole that goes all the way through. It's got a high point and a low point. We want to have the high point, the one that we stick our wire into, so that the wire goes pointing down. And I usually leave about 1 inch of a tail. Okay? And this part comes out, the little daisy part. So that means it also turns around. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your loops are, see how this is like flat-sided like a pencil? I try and aim my holes or my loops to go on top of a ridge, because what that does is it puts your flat loop on top, and it actually does make it easier for your wire to go through. So if you put it on the flat part, then your wire is going to sit smack dab against that, and it's going to be a lot harder for you to get the wire behind it, and I'll show you what I mean. So the first loop, we're going to go take our end, and we're going to go through the loop that is the closest to the hole, and we're just going to pull that wire through so it's tight. Okay, Now we're going to move to the next one. We're going to do the same loop. So we're looping from right to left, and we're trying to make our end loop down here where this band is. It makes the easiest. So you may have to hold on to your wires with your thumb so that they don't move when you're working, but that only has to happen for the first couple of loops. So from right to left, pulling it tight, and our loop is down there. Okay, and we're going to go through all 6 of these little holes here. And we want to make sure that we're not going through anybody's loops here. So all these loops are standalone loops. Nobody's weaving into anybody yet. Okay, here's our last loop. Ooh. With this 24 gauge, you really don't get very much with 24 inches, so you may want to cut off a little bit more. Just remember what I said. Okay, so the next loop that we're going to make is we're going to come behind that first one we made. So what I did was I went behind the loop here, and I came out, and I made sure not to get behind or in that other loop. And my tail is on top of this, and my loop is on top. We don't want it to go underneath. We want to keep everything on top. And this part, you can snug up your wire a little bit. We don't have to keep your loops too big, but don't make it too tight either, because that'll make it harder for you to draw that when we draw it to the draw plate. All right, so here's our next loop. We're going behind, we're not going through the loop, we're going behind the loop. And 24 gauge, since that's the thickest, I was basically using this one to demonstrate because it is the easiest to see. But it may not be the easiest one to start with. So you may want to try with like a 26. That's actually a really nice, I think that's what I made this one with, was 26. Yeah, this is a 26 gauge. So, I mean, it's definitely different, but this is for demo purposes so you can see what I'm doing. Once again, we're going, there's our loop, we're going behind the loop all the way and out the back. So we're not going in, and the reason that we're doing this is because when we draw this down, what we're doing is we're taking those loops and we're basically squishing them together. And if you are putting your wires through more of a weaving style, then those loops are not going to move like we want them to. Okay, so this is a good spot to show you what that pin is for. So I take the pin, and you don't have to, if you lose this, it's totally fine. You just need to find a needle tool or another tack. This just has a really long tack to it, so the pointy end is very long and it's not too sharp. So, but what I did was I went behind here, and I'm going to actually try and get that tail too. And I'm going to raise it up so I can get the wire through easier. Yeah, I did not cut enough wire. I did not realize how big and bulky the 24 was. So, but that's okay because it gives me the opportunity to show you how to change wires right away. So what we're going to do is we're going to carefully pop this off. So take this so it's easier to get out and pop it off. Okay, and the last loop that we made was in this hole. So I'm going to put that loop over this hole. Now, if this looks really confusing right now, don't worry. What I'm going to do is try and get a little bit more on before I have to change again. And so I'm taking more wire off my spool right now, and I'm going to show you how fun it isn't to have such an amount of wire. You will see me get frustrated very quickly. But I'll be able to make more weaving on my tool. So, okay. So I'll show you this again, but what I'm doing is I'm taking my wire and I'm going through the last loop I made, and I'm putting that down there. Okay, and we're just going to go back to wrapping. Taking my wire, going behind. And one of the things that I find helpful is if you're having a hard time finding that end, you can take the wire and kind of bend it so that the point just kind of points up. There's a spot I need some help with. When you're doing the weave, when you're making your loops, try and keep your loops in a nice line, because that's also going to show when you are doing the weaving and drawing it down. And you know, I probably should explain that. Draw plates are what's used to close up your weaves when doing the Viking knit and other loose knits with wire. What you do is you start with the biggest hole that you can fit your work through, and you just slowly keep going down in size until it reaches the size you want. And there are certain weaves where you can't go past a certain point. I got the 28 gauge to go through this third hole, which looks like it's really small, but it's really not. So most of it's going to say 1/4 of an inch, and I think that's this one or this one, but you can go further if you try. And I'll try and show you a little bit how to do that. I may have to stop the video and get some more work to get pulled out, but I will show you. Taking the wire, popping up that weave, and going over. You know, if you are watching any of my videos and you decide that you don't understand something, or if I'm going too fast, leave a comment and I will get back to you and let you give you any hands or hints or whatever. I love helping people out, so do not be afraid to drop me a line. And also, if you like my videos, please subscribe and share, because that will get me the ability to make more. Okay, so because we didn't have very many loops, we want to make sure that we're keeping 6. So I almost didn't see this one, so we want to make sure that we get this last loop in here so that we have 6 loops still. Okay, so we're back to the beginning where we added our wire, and I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to try and get this to open up behind the 2 wires here, because we want to capture that wire to make sure that it's nice and secure, and when we draw it down it doesn't do anything funky. Okay. See how I have like a row going here? This is a very messy row because we had to add wire too soon. All right. Now, the instructions say that when you get 1 or 2 loops away from where you added the wire, that is when you take it off and let those wires get back together so you can thread them in. So let's do that really quick. This is 2 loops away from where I added wire. And make sure when you're doing this you don't capture this wire, else you won't be able to pull it off. So we're just gonna pop this up so it's easier to get out. Now when you pop that off, make sure you don't squish it, because that is not very fun to try and put it back on. Okay? And the only thing you want to make sure when you put it back on is that you're kind of lining up your loops to your edges there, so you've got a nice line that you can keep following. Okay, so we're getting back here. This got really messy in here. The only way we're going to be able to affect this is just slowly by working our loops apart. Hopefully we'll be able to see that in the next couple of loops, but what I want to do now is I want to get behind all of these loops here, or all of these ends, and I want to try and get my pen to go out the other side here. It's not very easy for some reason. It's fighting me. There we go. Okay. So I want to go behind all of those ends because I want to make sure that they're captured in that row, because that'll make sure that when you draw it through, those ends don't create any issues. Yeesh. Okay, officially I'm not a fan of thick wire on Viking Knit. That is tough. So, say we're having a hard time getting this in to do what it's supposed to. So I'm going to straighten it out. Okay, so here's our loop. Now, the straighter wire will go through easier, but if you have a problem and you can't get it to go through, like the end just won't go where you want it to go, take your hand and move up, and that will bend the wire kind of in an up direction, so that will come out easier. See how often I'm using that tack? Definitely a good tool, and it comes included in that kit. So I hope that you're seeing the pattern that's basically happening. We're creating loops and we're leaving a little bit of space between the rows of loops that we're creating. And what's going to happen is when you draw that through the draw plate, those loops are going to bend, and it's going to bring the other loops together. see? Gotta be careful. I don't want to go through that other hole. Now I'm trying to make my loops all about the same size. That will help with an even look with your finished bracelet once it's drawn. And I believe the instructions indicate that you should have 3 rotations where you are grabbing those tail ends where you added before you cut them off, and that should help with them not coming out or the piece separating on you. You know, this is one of those projects that's really fun to do in front of the TV or like in a coffee shop. You're just chilling and not having to think about much because it is very repetitive. But, you know, repetitive processes are very calming at times. So I like to do this kind of stuff when like my anxiety gets too much or I just need to have a sit and chill out kind of moment. Alright, so we're back to those tails again. Try and get under them. You know, coming back from the bottom here has helped me when I can't seem to get it to go where I want it to. Okay. And I'm going to go just like a couple of loops away before I trim it off. Just so I don't accidentally trim off that working wire, because that would be frustrating. Alright. So now I'm just going to trim it right up close to the loops here. Alright. Once again, if you're just joining me, or if you forgot the pattern, we're taking our wire and we're looping it around from right to left. We're passing it behind the loops X down here, and we're pulling it tight. Now, one of the things that you can do with this weave is you can try different patterns. So you could catch the loop above. I think that's called a double. Or you can use more than one wire at a time, which I will tell you, I would put that towards the end of your trial. So get a couple of these single wires through first. Before you attempt the double wire, because that is very frustrating. So if you're just starting out with that Viking weave, stick to the one, stick to a medium-sized wire, like a 26, and just play until you understand the basics. And with Viking Knit, you're going to need your knitting tool, like the Lazee Daizee, and you're also going to need a draw plate. Both of these things are now offered at Softlegs, so you can definitely jump online and purchase both of them. We've had the draw plate for a while because you can use the draw plate to use with the knitting spools that we have. And sometimes the kumihimo as well. Okay. And sometimes, like, if you're getting too far down on your spool, it's good to kind of move it around and pop it up, because otherwise it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get off when it's time to add wire. And we are almost there to add some more wire. So I like to have like about an inch left. So if it's hard to get those last loops done, you know, if you're having a hard time getting your last loop to match, that's probably just enough to leave. All right, so I popped that off, and I'm gonna put it back on. Remember our holes here? So we want the one closest to the top. And I'm gonna put that last loop that I made, I'm gonna put right over that little hole, okay? I'm gonna get some more wire. I'm just gonna straighten this off camera real quick. Okay, all right, so our last loop right over that hole. So there's a hole right, you gonna focus, maybe, right there. I'm going right through. And I'm bending it down, and I'm just gonna keep wrapping. So I'm holding the ends down with my forefinger and my thumb just to keep them out of the way. Use all your fingers in wire wrapping. Like an octopus with 5 arms. Okay, here we go. And we're going to go at least one time around. Remember not to grab this one. Do not go under that. Just go over it. Make sure you don't catch it up. And as always, remember that what I'm showing you are guidelines just to get the technique. You can try anything you want to once you get everything kind of understood, your tension, which wire works best for you. Now, this was our last loop. That way, stuck the wire down through. So we're going to go behind the X and behind our last loop wire, making sure that this wire goes over it. So basically it's pinning it down. And that's just threading that wire into our loop line, just like we did with those other pieces. Okay, here's that wire. We're going to stop for a second and pop this off gently. Move that wire up a little so it comes out easier. Okay. So now that wire that we dropped through the hole and our starting wire are now nice and stuck right next to each other. So I'm going to put it back on and just keep wrapping. So I'm going to take this wire, see if I can kind of shove it over. This is not going to budge. But I want to get into this hole. There we go. Okay, now we're back to those two ends. So I'm going to try and get both of the ends, and there, voila. Basically, this tack is like a tougher, bigger piece of wire that you're creating a path for the other wire with. So that's what you're trying to achieve. Is if you're using the tool, you go through where you want your wire to go, and it will open up that path so you can easily pop it through. So it gets pretty quick once you actually get the rhythm. Problem is you have to keep adding wire. Now for this project, like I said, I'm not going to make it very long, just long enough for you to be able to see a change when we pull it through, and I can show you how to finish as well. So what I'd like to do is just go ahead and try and get some more work on this off camera so that you don't have to sit here and be hypnotized by the wire. Alright, so I will be back in just a moment. Alright, so I did a little bit more. I'm just going to finish this little row up here. Now I was being speedy, which I've always said is not necessarily your friend, and some of my rows got kind of close together, but I will show you that it's not necessarily a horrible thing. Just kind of, this project kind of corrects itself when you are drawing it down, so it's good that way. Okay, there we go. So I made about, I don't know, 3 inches here. So I'm just gonna take that off of the Lazee Daizee. And now you see the daisy on top. You can push that down a little to expose your loops. Because what we're gonna do is we're going to snip those loops. Just each one. Okay, and you can take the little daisy off. Now this is the disturbing part is that when you take this off, you're going to notice that you're losing links. But that is okay. These are those really long links that we just made at the very beginning, so they can come out. You can actually cut your work like anywhere, and you'll lose some links, but it'll still be solid because it will basically cut off to the next one of these little bunny ears. I'm going to twist these 2 little pieces together here. It's like our first on our tail end. And just kind of get them out of the way for a second. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to get, I got some 20 gauge wire. You can use like junk wire if you have for this part. This is basically, I'm getting some wire so I can draw through the draw plate. And you do need to make yourself a little handle. You know what, I'm just going to take a little bit more. I like a little longer handle. Okay, so that was probably confusing, but what I am doing is making 3 lengths of wire. So we have 3 lengths here. And you know, you can use the same diameter of wire if you'd like, the same gauge, but I like to go up a little because it gives me a little bit more sense of security. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find 2 loops and I'm going to go like 2 right across from each other. So these 2, I'm going to go just pass my wire through them like that and just bring it up. Then I'm going to find 2 more right across from each other. Just fold it in half. And then my last ones, find your empty bunny ears. There they are. Oop. Looks like I have to do that one again. Okay, so I have my handles. I'm just going to twist them together just so they don't do what they just did. And I'm going to just clip this little tail off down to here, just so it doesn't get in my way. Okay. All right, so we have our handle here, our tail ends are here. We're going to go through our draw plate handle first. Okay, so this is the neat part. We've got a short little bit of weave, but it does tell you to kind of condition the wire. You can use some cloth. This basically just kind of gets it all on the same width. Okay, it's a little wide. So I'm going to take my pliers, gently pull it through. You know, it doesn't want to go. So what that means is I'm just going to press it down and roll it a little. Because the diameter of the wire, the gauge, is really heavy. And I don't have any bigger holes. So I'm going to try and pre-squish this kind of. Let's try this again. Here, it's moving. Okay, so the first one's always the hardest. Okay. You can pull it through a couple more times just to make sure that the weave is even all the way around. Okay, so there's the first pass. See how it's kind of evening itself out? Okay, let's go through the second hole. These little, try to make sure these little bits of wire from the end are kind of wrapped up because you don't want them to bend outwards and add to your drag when you're trying to pull this through. Whew. I don't think we're going to be able to go through too many of these holes. I think that's why it said to stop at the 1/4 inch. Can smell the wood cooking from the heat from the wire going through. Okay, maybe one more. Let's try it. See if it'll go. Okay, so we had about 3 inches, and now we have about maybe 4. I should get a ruler. But the point of that is drawing it down is not going to add very much length to your project. So you really want to make sure that you complete a sufficient amount before you draw. So I would give yourself maybe 2/3 of your project has completed what weave before you draw down. So if you're trying to make like an 18-inch necklace, I would create like 15 inches of that necklace, because I think I made about 12 inches of this weave, and it drew out to about 16 inches. So really, it closes the loops and it makes it nicer looking. So if you messed up, it's going to kind of hide those mess ups, but it's not going to add that much length. So don't think that you're going to have like this project that you only have to do half of the length on. The other thing is, see how it's kind of pretty stiff? What you can do is you can go through and just kind of wiggle these, because they've basically become links now. So you can kind of bend those links around, and that will open it up a little, and it will become more flexible. So it bends now. Okay, so we're going to cut our handle off here. Okay, so that's basically the finished off the Lazee Daizee weave thing. Now, finishing this, of course, is going to be entirely up to you. You could, the Lazee Daizee comes with this pointed end here that you can use to make end caps. I use them here. The instructions show you how to do a coiled end cap, so basically the inside of a coil is going to be wrapped around the end of this. So it's really interesting. I just decided to go with it, just a simple coil. And then to add beads, I took another piece of wire and I passed it through the center here so that I had an end that I could do a little wrapped loop on either end, and then I added a clasp and a jump ring. On this one though, I had some prefabbed cones, and what I did was I threaded a piece of wire through all of the loops. So instead of having a wire go through and make this too stiff, I took a piece of wire, and this one you could use the same wire dimension that you used when you were weaving, and I just wove it through, trying to capture. It's kind of tough, but basically there's still two more. Third one. Go on. Okay, and our last one. Okay, there. So I've got a wire through all 6 of those loops, and now I can draw them together and create an end. Now, because the Viking knit is really rough ends, I mean, they're not necessarily the prettiest, especially since you have an extra tidbit just kind of hanging out there. They really do need to have some sort of finished cap on it, like either a bead or something. But in this case, I am just giving you a tool to add something on. So you can either do like, you can put your bead cap, thread it on through this, and then you can make a nice end, or whatever you want to do. This is totally your project, but that is one way of ending it. The other way, like I said, is threading a wire through the entire center of the piece so that you have a heavier wire that you can make your wrapped loops with and thread beads and however you want to end it. But that is that. So let's clear our workstation here. Let's take a look at this again. All right. So with 24 gauge wire, we made this today. Okay. And this was the tool, the Lazee Daizee. And here's some other examples. All right. Well, I had fun today. I really hope that you enjoyed it. It wasn't too difficult to follow. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put something down in the comments. Please like my video and subscribe to our channel so you can see and get notified when we get more videos going. We have multiple people that make videos here at Softflex. I'm just one of them, but I would love to get your subscription. So please feel free to click that like and subscribe. Alright, so I will see you again next time on another episode of Conversations in Wire. Thanks again for joining me. You have a great day. Bye.